watching Tim's Tiny Arcade, mother effer.
All right, guys, so we're going to listen to part 2 from Corgs-Con from the panel. The first part 1, if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link in the description. It was about the video game crash, and the guest at this is David Crane, Garry Kitchen, Brian Colin, and Warren Davis. And today's question was going to be, that was asked at the panel, was what games that were ported, games that they had made, were ported to different systems that they didn't like. So let's see what they have to say. Sit back and relax, guys, and let's watch part 2. I just want to let you know there will be a part 3 also, so stay tuned for that one in the near future. And thank you for watching, and let's jump into it, guys.
Next question, please. Anybody got another question? Yes. I think all 4 of you gentlemen have had your work at some point or another ported by someone else to, say, a different console. I was wondering if there were any ports in particular you were especially disappointed with, and why? The only port that I remember being disappointed with was Pigskin. They did Razorsoft did Pigskin, and they used my character art straight from the video game, which you would think would make me happy, but they didn't adjust it for the format, so all the characters were stretched, and I'm a artist, animator first, so that annoyed me. And then they changed the name to Jerry Glanville's Pigskin Foot Brawl, which really annoyed the crap out of me. Everything else, it's fascinating listening to stuff that I didn't know, maybe because Midway management left us alone and we were having fun and we were in a kind of almost Animal House sort of, we're all in this together. But while some people were suffering on the business side because they understood it, and some people were moving from the industry because things got closed, I guess I was blessed by ignorance, because I've spent 40 years more or less having fun doing what I do. And the only reason I bring this up is because I've had my own company for 30 years, Game Refuge. I'm not a business guy. I'm one of these idiots who, you come to me and say, make a game, it's my inner child is going, oh, cool, how much do I have to pay you to do that? So I'm not a businessman. But from the standpoint of ports, I always looked at them as an homage. So if I looked at something and it was, oh man, look at that great cover art, but Ralph's not in the game because they couldn't do all 3 characters, it wasn't so much a disappointment as, well, they did the best they could, maybe they'll do it better next time.
Well, how about the movie?
Oh, the movie was frickin'. It was we got time for a quick movie recap? Okay, real quick. Years ago when I first heard it was going to happen, I wrote them and said, I've got these great backstories. If you need any help, polite, thanks, we'll let you know. That's all I ever heard from her. I wrote to Stan Lee. I said, look, they're doing a movie based on a game I did. If they offer me a cameo, I've never done a cameo. Would you play me in the cameo? He never answered me. So finally I get a call from someone in a casting company in Chicago. They say, they're shooting in Chicago, you want to be an extra? Yes. So I went out for a couple of weeks. I'm running through the streets of Chicago as an extra. It doesn't get any better than this, right? And then the next time I'm out, assistant director pulls me over and says, I understand you designed the game. It's like, yeah. He goes, we got to do a cameo. Spent the afternoon shooting a cameo, running away from imaginary Willis Tower falling on my head. Obviously, doesn't get any better than that. A couple weeks after that, John Rickard, producer, calls me up, says, I'm John Rickard. I said, I know who you are. He goes, well, I know who you are. I've been wanting to call you for years to get you involved in this, but, legal reasons, blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah, understandable. He said, but you're an employee now because you were an extra. You want to come down and visit the set during the last week of shooting? So, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, sure. He took me through the script. He took me through how they made sure George, because in the original Rampage, the people are the victims, right? You know, they're just trying to get along, you know, eat, sleep, run away from all the reasons Midway didn't want me to do it. You know, eating people and fighting with the army and everything. But, so the producers got that. They made sure the script had heart. Everything I heard about it made me fall in love with it. I couldn't talk about it for a year until the movie came out. Had some friends call me from LA and say, just saw a test screening, you're on this, your face is 30 feet high and the building's coming down behind you. I get invited to the premiere. My wife and I go out. I'm sitting there and it's like, okay, I can see you. Okay, here it comes. Here it comes. Here it comes. So at the after party, first thing the producer says, how'd you like the movie? Love the movie. Next thing he says, really sorry, but Warner came in 3 weeks ago and had to cut out 30 minutes of Easter eggs, so you're now on the cutting room floor. But there was, on set, that's the end of the story, but the little insert in the middle, just to let you, everybody says The Rock is a nice guy. He is nicer than nice. I was taking a shot with the producers. It's over there. You can see it at the booth. And they're filming the last scene in the movie behind me, he and Natalie Harris. And I'm taking this picture, and all of a sudden I hear, stop, I got to be part of this. He comes down. I am geeking out. And I don't care what it looks like in that picture. That man is 150 feet tall when you're standing next to him. I'm geeking out. He said some wonderful, wonderful things about how hard he was working on the thing and how the fact that I was there that day and standing 100 yards back, hiding behind the equipment, the grin on my face made it all worthwhile. And that's why I said, man, you are nicer than everybody says you are, and everybody says you're the greatest. So I just want to endorse him for that. But I'm rambling, and I'm somebody else talking. Thank you.
That's going to be my question.
Or you could take the long way around. You could have just put it over your head. I remember back in a previous lifetime there was a question about ports. I'm going to talk about the Kubert ports specifically to answer your question. Having done the arcade game and Kubert being my first game, I really didn't understand the process. I was told that there were other people who were going to be making the ports. Kubert was ported to something like 8 different consoles, I remember going to the Consumer Electronics Show where most of these were introduced. And it was a weird thing, because on the one hand, many of them looked absolutely terrible. I mean, the 2600 version was just atrocious. But as an engineer, I understood, you can only do so much with the hardware you're given. But these guys who I admire were tasked with taking the arcade game, which is running on 16 color hardware, whatever the resolution is, and they're having to force that game onto hardware that really wasn't made to do that. So I understood, but I think the Atari 2600 was the worst looking one. There were a couple of other bad ones. The one that really stood out to me that was amazed that I thought looked and played really well was ColecoVision. I just thought ColecoVision was far beyond. It was also a newer console, so its hardware capabilities were more. I was always amazed though, like some of the games I worked on later on in my career, like Terminator 2 or Revolution X with the digitized graphics, I couldn't believe they even attempted to port some of those things. David was talking a bit earlier about how the home games were capable of doing things that the arcade games were doing, and that's what kept people home. In the arcade industry, we were always trying to stay one step ahead. We were trying to make the hardware better than what the home game systems were capable of, but they kept on making these ports. So eventually, it was like in the 1990s, I would say, the tides turned. And the graphics cards for PCs and the systems you could buy were capable of doing as much as an arcade game could do, and I think that really changed the industry. But so to your port question, I really like the ColecoVision version of Q*bert. Atari 2600, just the worst.
Just one comment. I don't even know if you know this. The Atari 2600 version of Q*bert was actually done by someone very famous, David Hampton. Does anybody know who David Hampton is? David Hampton invented Furby. The inventor of Furby did the Atari 2600 port of Q*bert. And I know it's ugly as hell, but from a technology standpoint, it was really very, very well done. Yes, and you recognize that. All right, next question. Oh, Dave, you're in.
Well, my games have been ported quite a bit. The philosophical reason that ports are done by different people than the creators is because it's a different process, completely different task. At Activision, we didn't own any properties, any arcade games or whatever, so what we were doing was we were creating brand new original game titles that had never been done before. You know, they're different, they're a new game. And we had a number of people capable of doing that sort of thing. You wouldn't want to take those people and say, spend the next 6 months making a port of your game. Instead, you gave the game to someone else who's technically competent but doesn't necessarily have the ability to create a new fun game, and said, all right, so you're going to take this game as if it is a specification, and you're going to make that game on this console. And if you can't tell them apart, you've done a perfect job. There is a great story about porting Pitfall to the Atari 8-bit and Commodore 64, which were new home computers coming out with more capability than the Atari 2600. I was sitting in a room with those two guys. They were new guys we brought in. And one of them decided they would do what I just said. They would take Pitfall and play it and put a screen up, and then they would make the Commodore 64 display that screen. Then they would move the joystick left, and they'd make the guy move left the same amount that the Atari did. And you basically duplicated the machine completely on the Commodore 64. The other guy, Mike Lorenzen, said, wait a minute, the Atari 800 and the 6502 are both based on the 6502 microprocessor. Said that wrong, but you know what I mean. So David Crane's code is written in 6502. I can take his entire piece of code and put it on the Atari 800. Now all I have to do is create an emulator for the video of what the Atari 2600 is capable of doing and emulate that on the 800. And so he went a different route. So Tim Schauder, doing the C64, every day something else happened on the screen. It changed, you could see it slowly evolving. Mike sits over here and weeks go by and nothing happens on the screen because he's taken the code and now he's doing it a different way. He's trying to create a whole new method of display. And then X number of weeks later, you come in and Pitfall is on the screen on the Atari 800. It's done. It has no bugs because it started with my code. All the game logic is there, all the debugged code is in there. All he changed was the display, and you can tell when the display doesn't work, you fix that, right? So he was completely debugged at the same time that Tim on C64 reached the beta version, which is all the features are in, but now we have to fix bugs. Tim spent the next month fixing bugs in his rewritten code. Mike Lorenzen spent the next month putting in an entirely new level in the Atari 800. So there's a second game that starts when you finish the first game. And you get double the value because he finished without having to have a debug period, which is an interesting, different way. We had a perfect case study. They both started on the same day, they both had to end on the same day, and one way was so much more efficient because he started with debugged code and was able to put in a whole nother level. All the other Pitfall ports I had nothing to do with. Don't hold me responsible for the Sega Pitfall port. Don't hold me responsible for the arcade Pitfall port.
NES.
NES. There are a lot of bad Pitfall ports out there. Sorry.
Next.
Next question.